ميم عين سين قاف. كذلك يوحي إليك وإلى الذين من قبلك الله العزيز الحكيم. له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وهو العلي العظيم. تكاد السماوات يتفطرن من فوقهن والملائكة يسبحون بحمد ربهم ويستغفرون لمن في الأرض ألا إن الله هو الغفور الرحيم. والذين اتخذوا من دونه أولياء الله حفيظ عليهم وما أنت عليهم بوكيل. وكذلك أوحينا إليك قرآناً عربياً لتنذر أم القرى ومن حولها وتنذر يوم الجمع لا ريب فيه. فريق في الجنة وفريق في السعير. ولو شاء الله لجعلهم أمة واحدة ولكن يدخل من يشاء في رحمته والظالمون ما لهم من ولي ولا نصير. أم اتخذوا من دونه أولياء فالله هو الولي وهو يحيي الموتى وهو على كل شيء قدير. وما اختلفتم فيه من شيء فحكمه إلى الله. ذلكم الله ربي عليه توكلت وإليه أنيب. فاطر السماوات والأرض جعل لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا ومن الأنعام أزواجا يذرأكم فيه ليس كمثله شيء وهو السميع البصير. له مقاليد السماوات والأرض يبسط الرزق لمن يشاء ويقدر إنه بكل شيء عليم. شرع لكم من الدين ما وصى به نوحا والذي أوحينا إليك وما وصينا به إبراهيم وموسى وعيسى أن أقيموا الدين ولا تتفرقوا فيه. كبر على المشركين ما تدعوهم إليه. الله يجتبي إليه من يشاء ويهدي إليه من ينيب. وما تفرقوا إلا من بعد ما جاءهم العلم بغيا بينهم ولولا كلمة سبقت من ربك إلى أجل مسمى لقضي بينهم وإن الذين أورثوا الكتاب من بعدهم لفي شك منه مريب فلذلك فادع واستقم كما أمرت ولا تتبع أهواءهم وقل آمنت بما أنزل الله من كتاب وأمرت لأعدل بينكم الله ربنا وربكم لنا أعمالنا ولكم أعمالكم لا حجة بيننا وبينكم الله يجمع بيننا وإليه المصير. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
Come sit in front. Come sit in front. Come sit in front. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بفضل الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله والحمد حقه كما يستحقه حمدا كثيرا الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله اللهم لعن أول ظالم ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد وآخر تابع له على ذلك اللهم لعن العصابة التي جاهدت الحسين وشايعت وبايعت وتابعت على قتله اللهم لعنهم جميعا ثم الصلاة والسلام على خير خلق الله أجمعين محمد اللهم صل وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. When the third holy Imam, Imam Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, was called to give allegiance to Yazid ibn Muawiyah, and he refused. He was given an ultimatum. And that ultimatum was either you give allegiance or you die. Or either you give allegiance or you have to fight. You're going to be put in a position where we're at war with you. And his response was this. He said, Ala wa inna ad-da'i ibn ad-da'i. Talking about Ubaydullah ibn Marjana or ibn Ziyad. And just to let you know why he used these terms to begin with, ad-da'i ibn ad-da'i means the claimant, the son of the claimant. And we're not talking about a legal procession here. The claimant being that Ubaydullah had claimed that Ziyad was his father, and this was not the case. And Ziyad had also claimed that Abu Sufyan was his father. They used to call him Ziyad ibn Abi, Ziyad the son of his father, whoever that may be. He said this claimant, the son of this claimant, it's a nice way of saying this illegitimate child. The son of an illegitimate child, or using the 7-letter B word. That's a nice way. قَدْ رَكَزَ بَيْنَ اثْنَتَيْنِ. That basically this person that is so vile, back then he doesn't even know, okay, from where he came, nor does his supposed or alleged father know, has given me, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, the son of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the son of Fatima al-Zahra, the son of Rasulullah, an ultimatum between two. What are they? He says, بَيْنَ السِّلَّةِ وَالذِّلَّةِ. Silla means when you unsheath your sword, when you take your sword out of your scabbard, which means going to war. So one option he's given me is I have to fight. وَالذِّلَّةِ, meaning humiliation or disgrace. And the Imam gave his response, which is a slogan that is used and echoed for century upon century, which was Hayhat minna dhilla. That far from us, when you say hayat, far from us is disgrace. This is not something we'd even consider for a moment. To be humiliated or to be disgraced. And this is our discussion tonight. It surrounds humiliation and disgrace. And it's so important. See, forever, Western culture has failed to understand Islam. Why? Because for Western culture, everything ends with what? The worst thing that can happen to you in Western culture is what? Death. Death is the worst possible thing that can happen to anybody that adheres by Western way of life. To die is the worst thing. And this is the problem that they would have when they would counter the believers, because the believers had something greater than death. They had their mabadi' and their qiyam. They had their way of life. They had their ethics. They had these things, this code of living or code of conduct, the way that they would carry themselves that were more important. Things like what? Things like honor. Things like dignity. These were all greater. Above death. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamu alayh says al-maniyya wal-daniyya. In other words, he's saying death is preferable than living a life of humiliation or disgrace. Al-maniyya, I'd rather just die than be disgraced. So in other words, if I had to choose between death and humiliation, which we'll understand what humiliation is and disgrace, death is always the choice. As you would hear this often, death before dishonor. They always say that. And everyone would have an understanding of what this honor code. For many years, the last feudal system to exist was what? The Japanese feudal system. And they had an honor code. And this honor code was so great, but they would go to extents that are un-Islamic, where they would actually, when they dishonored themselves, they would commit suicide, which is something that we do not accept in any way, shape or form, because that is the coward's way out. But dishonor was that great that no one could accept this. In fact, Imam Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, on the day of Ashura, what did he say towards the enemy when he was left? Remember, there was no one left. He was on his own. And this is when you're at your most vulnerable. When there's nobody left, it's just you. He would say what? Al-qatlu awla min ruqub al-ari. Or al-qatlu khayrun min ruqub al-ari. Al-qatl, to be killed, is better than ruqub al-ari. What does ruqub al-ari mean when I hear this? Ruqub al-ari is when you ride a horse without a saddle. They say ride a horse bareback. They call that ruqub al-ari, which is when a horse is saddled. This is what having a saddle on a horse is trying to say, that this is the honorable way. So ruqub al-ari here is saying as an example of disgrace. So to be killed is better than for me to be disgraced or live a life of humiliation. Why? What's he talking about, this disgrace? He's talking about the allegiance to Yazid. This is humiliation. That I disgrace myself by pronouncing that Yazid is my commander. And then he says, وَالْعَارُ أَوْلَى مِنْ دُخُولِ النَّارِ. Yes, disgrace is worse than death, but the fire of hell is worse than disgrace. So you need to know the order it comes in. So in other words, if I'm forced to be disgraced, what would be an example where you're forced to be disgraced? Or you're forced, for example, if someone puts a gun to your head and says, I will kill you, okay? If you've seen those cases where someone commits a crime under duress. For example, someone says, I will kill this many people if you don't do this crime. Taban, not killing another person. Or for example, they tell you eat something that is not permissible, or will kill the people in this room, for example. So there, I have to put myself in a position because I don't want all this murder to be committed. It's different to, it's not a case that's commonly taken place. So in other words, if it comes to hell, everything is better than going to the fire of hell. But what starts me off in the direction of being disgraced and humiliated? You notice when someone dies and they write a report about their life. Recently, you had 2 Australian cricketers pass away. And the people were so astonished with the second cricketer that died because he was only 52 years old. They said he's so young, and his life came to an end so early. And it was a big issue because this person's young. Why? Because life is considered the only thing. That's all that exists. There's nothing else. And this is the first problem leading us towards disgrace. Al-Imam Ja'far ibn Mohammed al-Sadiq, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. He says, Man ahabba al-hayata dhal. Man ahabba al-hayata dhal. When someone dies, what do they say? This person loved life. However, this is the first thing that gets you in the wrong direction. You want to know where people fall apart? It's because they love living. And you say, hold on. Should we have a morbid fascination with death? Should we actually love to die? It's not should we love. It's our natural destination. It's when we're created. We are created to die. We're heading in that direction. يا أيها الإنسان إنك كادح إلى ربك كدحا فملاقيه. You are heading in the direction towards your Lord. You're striving in that direction. Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi said in his hadith, he said, Wallahi labnu Abi Talib. He says, La anasa bil maut. Min al-tifli li thadi ummi. The Amir al-Mu'mineen said that he is more familiar or more comfortable with death than an infant is with his mother's breast. Could you imagine that? An infant that breastfeeds. You've seen an infant when they're crying and their mother comes close and they can smell the breast milk. They get all jolly and their crying goes into another tone. They're waiting for it. They're about to... Amir al-Mu'mineen feels about this in the same way. And that's why when he was struck on the head, he said, Fustu wa Rabbil Kaaba. I am successful. I am victorious by the Lord of Kaaba. And when the time came for him to pass, he said, لِمِثْلِ هَذَا فَلْيَعْمَلِ الْعَامِلُونَ. Decide upon death. A mu'min is more familiar with death. That's his destination. He wants to move from this least world, this transient world, this world that is terminal, to the eternal abode. بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا والآخرة خير وأبقى. Do we seek this world? Do we strive for this world? Wherein the hereafter is better and it's perpetual. It's eternal. It's forever. This is what he's trying to say here. Some say, hold on, I'm not going for this world, but I'm going to do this for now and I'll become good later. I'll sell rocks for the first half of my life, build a house, get myself set for life, avoid the cops, won't go to jail. And then what happens? Then I'll go Hajj and become a mu'min. But let me tell you something. This is one of the biggest mistakes people make from the very beginning. Because they've made a decision that their income is going to come from haram. Or, everyone's got this, you get these people with the get-rich-quick schemes. They're always trying to find a way to make money quick. Look, your rizq is from Allah. Your sustenance comes from Allah. Some people, doesn't matter what they touch, it turns to dust. Other people, doesn't matter what they touch, it turns to gold. Their sustenance is from God. You watch these, how many children watch YouTube and they see these YouTubers or they see these influencers and they say, all right, I'm going to make a YouTube channel, I'm going to become famous. So they start playing games, recording them, putting them on, thinking one day I'm going to have millions of subscribers. But you can't all be the millions of subscribers. How many stories you've heard of sportsmen? All these players that were good but then had injuries. They finish an injury, another injury, and then they retire earlier because they can't make it. I remember when I was young, there was a guy that was playing rugby union. A lot of you might know him. His name was Jonah Lomu. This guy, they were talking about him. He's going to be the Muhammad Ali of rugby union. The guy was 100, and this is no exaggeration. The guy was about 121, 122 kilos. Okay? And he was 196 centimeters tall. And he could run the 100 in 10.5 seconds. Something like that. Something ridiculous. Do you imagine that storming at you? And everyone was talking, this guy is going to be the next big thing. All of a sudden, he had renal failure, had kidney failure, and he died before the age of 40. His career came abrupt end in his 20s. Just ended. He didn't reach these, ability, these positions. You even see in football today. People sit there and they look and they say, oh, look, Messi and Ronaldo. Yeah, Messi and Ronaldo had longevity. But you look at other people like Ronaldinho and that. They were great players, but they didn't have that longevity. And then there was those that never even made it. They were superstars. There was a guy back in 1984, I think it was. He was drafted by the Boston Celtics. He was going to be the next superstar. It's before Michael Jordan. Or 1986, or it was 1 year after Michael Jordan. They said this guy's going to be the next superstar. His name is Lenny Bias, if you look him up. This guy was from a good Christian family. And the year that he got drafted and they were talking big about him, that night his friends said, let's go party. Okay, he got on the rack that night. And he OD'd and died. And the Boston Celtics were crying over all the, possible championships they could have won with this guy. So these opportunities don't come for some people. Some people, everything works out for them. Some people like, what's his name? Cameron Smith. Looks like an accountant. Never gets injured. Wins everything. Always plays. He has the best players around him. Things always work out in their life. So sometimes things aren't meant to work out. I'm not supposed to look to make things work out for me. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam says, Sa'atu dhullin la tafi. He says, Sa'atu dhullin la tafi bi'izzi dahr. A moment of disgrace, he says, will never compensate for a life of dignity. A moment. You have these people. I remember once this guy said to me, he wanted to get a housing commission. So he said to me, I went out into the street and I lived in the park with my family. I said, but you have money. He said, yeah, but that's the only way to make it work. I said, you humiliated yourself. He said, but I got the housing commission. You humiliated yourself. How can you live with that? You disgraced yourself. I want to get some kind of a opportunity, so I do this. That's why Imam al-Baqir salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi says, La dhulla ka dhulli tama. It's greed that makes them go in this. There's no disgrace like the disgrace of greed. And that's why they do this. They humiliate themselves to get that edge. You need to hear some stories. Some guy, he'll go to a house. These are actual stories. I tweak them a bit so you can never know who the person is. Okay? But these actual stories have happened. They're tweaked so no one can ever find out who the person is that we discuss. All right? One guy, he went to go ask for a girl's hand. He went into the house and he kept turning up. And then one day the mother said, listen, you are from a lesser caste than us. You're lower than us. You know, you think this is, the caste system is from the subcontinent, you know. Like, you know, for example, the subcontinent where India and Pakistan, all that, sometimes they'll refuse someone because he's dark skinned. Did you know that? They prefer a lighter skinned person. So they look at the caste system, even there. She said, you're from a lower caste. You do not have the same wealth that we have. We're richer than you. We're this, we're that, and you are not worthy to be known as the husband of my daughter. This is before Kat picked up. This is not after they are married and there were issues and she's given him a peace of mind. No, this is before everything. He gets humiliated. He is mocked all over the floor. And later he's married with many kids. He accepts this. He accepts this. Why? He says, I want this woman. I said, but why? When he told me, I said, I would never accept this. This is disgrace. You're a believer. No one should humiliate you. Al-mu'min aziz. A mu'min should never allow this to happen. One of the brothers that we know, he applied for a job. I've said this story before. And the condition they gave him is they said to him, you're the best applicant, and he wanted this job. They said, you're the best applicant, and your interview was the best, but we only have one problem, that you're a Muslim. Do you have an issue with alcohol? He said, what do you mean? They said, so we might have boardroom interviews, meetings, we're going to drink beer. Or you might have to carry a case here and there. And he said, this has nothing to do with my vocation. It has nothing to do with my work. They said, well, this is our only issue. He said, no. You know, I have my religion. So he moved on. He left. And he applied for another job. And he was doing the interview process. He was going to get the second job. They called him back. He told me at the time, I really wanted this job. And I was upset that they put this condition. They said, listen, we'll allow. They said, would you give some leeway? He said, nothing. They said, we'll allow just return. And he said, no, I'm going to apply for another job. They said, come back and we'll increase $10,000 on your salary. But just return to us. So when he applied first, he was in the middle. They tried to make his hand from the bottom. Sell us your religion and get this job. He refused. He came back, his hands on top. They're begging him and they're giving him more money. This is honor. The other way is humiliation. Where, I have to do this or I'll lose my job. So what if you're going to lose your job? They don't sustain you. Allah sustains you. Likewise for money. People will do almost anything to get money. People, even it's proposed when you watch movies and you watch television, they form your way of thinking. When you're watching all these shows, they push the way of thinking. And in the Arab world, they're starting to do this in a stronger way than even the West does it in their shows. They'll push it to the point where they will make something noble that is disgraced. Recently, they made a show where a woman worked in the oldest trade known to man in order, this is an Arab show, in order to help her father with his medical bills. And then the show made the character into a noble character. That she says in the show, I'm willing to sell my honor for the health of my father. ما لكم كيف تحكمون. What ails you? How ill do you judge? What's wrong with people? Honor. She says, I will sell my honor. You sell your honor, is not yours to sell. Allah is the one that gives honor. Allah is the one that gives you that position. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamu alayh says in a hadith in Nahj al-Balagha, he says, رضي بالذل من كشف عن ضره. رضي بالذل من كشف عن ضره. That whoever discloses their problems or their shortcomings, all the things that they have, he says that this person resigns themselves to be disgraced, puts themselves in a position to be disgraced. You know, those people, they complain to everyone. Every time they meet somebody, you know, the negatrons of society, you sit with them, they just sit and they complain. And we do it ourselves. We complain about certain things. Some people, everything's a problem. Everything they're given. If they're given a gift, it's a problem. Why? You know? Why did they give me this? You know, a child, you know, those gimme kids, the ones that get everything. You know, I didn't want this. I wanted the number 2, not the number 1. Or I wanted the GLX, not the GL. You know, rather than say, Alhamdulillah, I got something. I remember one guy in our community, he purchased a car for his wife. And it was, I think it was about $150,000, $160,000 car. She said, I don't like white. I'm not joking. This is a true story. This guy doesn't turn up to send us, so don't worry. So he went to trade it in. And they told him, you're going to lose money. He said, so what? And he got her the car in black. She doesn't like white. You know? They're those types of people. You know? I don't like this color. Imagine like someone turns up and buys you a Lamborghini. Not that color. I don't like black. You know, if you bought it in red, I'd accept it. Then after you put him in the boot of the car and bury him somewhere, God knows what happens. So you sit with this person, the entire discussion, they're complaining about everything. You know, when you complain, firstly, I've mentioned this a lot. When you complain to an enemy, it makes them happy that you're suffering. Or when you complain to a friend or a family, it makes them feel upset because they want to help you and they can't. You hurt them when you complain to them. But when you complain a lot, it's a sign of weakness. When I sit there and I complain about everything, it shows I'm weak. Why am I complaining? You know, that's why they used to tell you, eat a bag of cement. Now you can't say that because everything's gone PC. You know, they'll sit there and say, you know, that's okay, you can cry. You want a tissue? That's a new world you live in. You don't harden up anymore. When I was a kid, even in Australia, that's how it used to be. My brother will know this. We used to have fights outside with your neighbours. The neighbour would come up and crack you both and send you home. That was normal. That was normal. I'm talking about Aussie, white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant neighbours would hit you. That was absolutely normal because everyone would discipline everyone in the street. You weren't allowed to be soft. You know, if you had a limp wrist, they'd make it stiff immediately. They wouldn't give you an abode in Newtown or Oxford Street. It would end there. But anyway. The other thing is when you start mentioning things about your life, you disgrace yourself, especially if you mention war stories. You know the people that start talking about what they used to do when they were younger. Back when I was young, I used to drink. Back when I was young, I used to use drugs. Back when I was young, This is terrible. Because when they first meet you, they have the best impression of you. When you start saying what you did and what you used to do, you humiliate yourself. You degrade yourself, and there's no need to do that. Why should I disgrace myself to other people? Another thing about disgrace is sometimes when you see someone that is proud. If you see someone that's proud, shaif halu, mutakabbar, it is to compensate their disgrace. You know what I mean? That's why Napoleon wanted, one of the reasons Napoleon wanted to conquer the world. You know why? Because Napoleon was pint-sized. Napoleon had small man syndrome. He was so, I didn't mean anything else, but Napoleon was small. Okay? So Napoleon was so small, he wanted to show that, I'm somebody. See me. I'm going to be out there. I'm going to do something about this. Al-Imam al-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi says, ما من رجل تكبر إلا لذلة وجدها في نفسه. They see a deficiency. It's a consequence of a disgrace, humiliation within, that they become proud. That's why we call them, on the Day of Judgment, they are people that Allah doesn't even look at. And He says, what are they? He says, مقل مختال. مقل ولا شيء. He's nothing and he's proud. Like you remember the story of Imperator al-Abariq. I remember this story from when I was a kid. One of the ulama came here and he said this story, and I never forgot this story. It was so funny. And the thing is, it could be applied to any one of us if we fall into this position. He said, when we were in Syria, he said, we used to go into the toilets. There was a guy that would look after the pitchers, the abariq, the abariq that used to wash your backside with. He manages them, he puts water in them. When you walk in, he gives you the a brick. He gives you the pitcher, So one guy came in, I think this guy had the runs. He ran in and he grabbed one quickly, he scooped it up and he ran to get to the toilet. And this guy got up and said, stop! Stop where you are! And he froze. He said, what's going on? He said, come back here. He said, he returned. And he goes, give me that. Put it down. And he gave him another one. So he said, I went into the toilet. Maybe the water was dirty. He said, when I finished my duty, I came out. And he said, why did you stop me? And he said, if you start taking whatever picture you want, then what's my position? You're disrespecting the position I am. The guy turned around and he said, you hand out butt water. You're handing out water people wash their backsides with. وشايف حالك. You think you're something? مقل مختال. Proud. And he's like, the guy's handing out water for people wash their backsides and he's proud of it. He's proud of this position. There are people, the guy could be in charge of a desk and he gets excited. Could be handing out pamphlets or samples and he says, yep, I'm in charge. I'm the head pamphlet guy or the head B guy. Anyway, why is this a problem? Because the mighty, al-izzatu lillah, whoever's mighty and honorable in the eyes of Allah doesn't have pride. They don't have pride. Whoever has pride is not mighty in the eyes of Allah Azza wa Jalla. And the biggest example of that is Iblis alayhi la'inullah. Even when it comes to supporting something, or taqiyyi, for example. You see those people, they do taqiyyi to a point where it's not taqiyyi anymore. They humiliate the whole religion. They'll mention an enemy of Ahlul Bayt and they'll say, radiyallahu anhu. You say, brother, how could you say radiyallahu anhu on this person? And he says, brother, for unity's sake. What do you mean unity's sake? No one's asking you to say this. This isn't the way you do it. Or you see the people, the male feminist. I was one of the brothers was saying right now that the people that push the agendas are not the people that are part of the group. For example, and this is common. For example, the people that belong to the Rainbow Brigade, they're not the ones that push the agenda. The ones that actually push the agenda are other people around. Politicians that want to push policies through. They want to make things go through. They want to make things happy. They're the ones that push these. So these people, they humiliate themselves on the behalf of others. To that point. We're not meant to write books in a way where they're going to be used against us later to humiliate us. Or say things that later will be used against us to humiliate us. Call a spade a spade. The best thing is don't talk. If you don't know what to say, don't talk. Don't get up and say, look, for the sake. I remember when I was younger, I was praying, we went to pray Jama'ah, and the guy leading the prayer, he turned around and he turned around in the prayers and he said, the other group, Allah ya'azhum, they keep firm lines. And I said, Afwan, after the prayer. I didn't want to humiliate, he was older than me. I said, Afwan, you should say what they do, but don't say Allah ya'azhum, Allah yadhilhum. Do not say, may Allah dignify them. These are the same people, and their khutbah, they're cursing you. When we go to the Hajj, he gets up and says, Shia kafir, this and that khutbah, the Shia are dogs, whatever they have got to say. Remember, and you know, when people say to you, where do people come up with this? Go into the mosques. You notice when you go in to pray, anyone walks into our mosque and wants to pray, we respect them. Ahla wa sahla, Muslim. You are, tafaddal and pray in our mosque. How many mosques you go in, the second they look at you, what are you doing? And this is the people that want the best experience, go to the Hajj to see this. Now we're not saying to Amal bil Mithal, you always have to be a good representative of the religion. You have to be the best you can be. But it doesn't mean because, for the unity's sake, I'm going to radda ala Yazid ibn Muawiyah, just for the sake of unity. No, this is not Islam. On the contrary, I don't get up and curse the enemies of God, so I don't curse problems, but I say what they did. So anyway, 2 final points and we're done. The known hadith, you hear this all the time. Man sarrahu al-ghina bila mal. Whoever wants wealth, ghina means needlessness, without wealth. How can I be needless without money? He says, وَالْعِزُّ بِلَا سُلْطَانٍ, and one's dignity and honor without authority, without power. وَالْكَثْرَةُ بِلَا عَشِيرَةٍ, and he wants kathra, feel great in number, without having a tribe. The Imam says, فَلْيَخْرُجْ مِنْ ذُلِّ مَعْصِيَةِ اللَّهِ إِلَى عِزِّ طَاعَتِهِ. Let them leave the disobedience, the humiliation of disobeying Allah, to the might and dignity of obeying Him. Who is the finest example that we know min ba'di Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi? Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, who says what? لا تزيدني كثرة الناس حول عزة ولا تفرقهم عني وحشة. That he says, I do not get any mightier if I have a lot of people with me. It's natural when we go out and you safety in numbers. If you go out and you've got 100 guys around you, how big do you feel? You feel like a mountain. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, I do not feel any mightier if I have all these people around. وَلَا تَفَرُّقُهُمْ عَنِّي وَحْشًا. And if everyone leaves me, I don't feel weak. I don't feel lonely. Why? He says, لِأَنِّي مُحِقٌّ وَاللَّهُ مَعَ الْمُحِقِّ. Amir al-Mu'mineen is in the right. He says, Allah is with those that are in the right. Allah is with these truthful people. Allah is with the obedient. And that's why, and I'll finish off just quickly with this story, and we're done. And this story is about, when we mentioned in the beginning of the month the births of our holy Imams, is about the Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein Zayn al-Abidin salawatullahi wa salamu alayh. Oft repeated story. That Hisham ibn Abdul Malik comes, he's the wali at the time, he's the governor there, he's not the Khalif. And he's with the other two of his family, Abdul Malik and Al-Walid. And they're performing Hajj. When they perform Hajj, Hisham's in his spiritual mode and says, I want to touch Hajj al-Aswad. If people have been a Hajj, how many people want to touch the Hajj? Not everyone gets to reach it. You've seen the numbers, they've always had numbers all over them. He wants to reach the Hajar, but he can't get through the wave. So he makes a pulpit and he sits on it. They sit on it and they watch the Hajjaj. While they're watching, they say a man comes wearing what? He is two parts. It says his ihram, his clothes. And he says, as the man comes amongst them, his face is luminant. And between his eyes, he says, there is a mark like, you say, the elbow or the kneecap of the goat. You know how you've seen how that is crusted in that? From worship. And he says, as he comes, he performs his manasik, as he gets close to want to touch the hajar, he says the scent from him is so lovely. He says his aura is so great. He says that all the people, they move out of the way. And he gets to the hajar, he kisses and touches the hajar. Hisham is angered. One Damascene man, a man from Damascus, says, who is this man that is amongst them? So Hisham says, I have no need to know who he is. You know, these people are just like that. You know, probably they know him. That's why they've dispersed. And then Al-Farazdaq, who is standing there, says, I will tell you who this man is. You asked, I will tell you who this man is. And he begins by saying, هذا الذي تعرف البطحاء وطأته. That this is the one about Ali ibn al-Hussein. He says al-Batha, see the earth. Listen to this. He says it knows his step. When he steps, it knows who he is. Think about this. When Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, when he used to walk, all the creation, we're not talking about the trees only, even the rocks would say, Assalamu alayka ya Muhammad. They knew his presence. هذا الذي تعرف البطحاء وطأته. He says, وَالْبَيْتُ يَعْرِفُهُ وَالْحِلُّ وَالْحَرَامُ. Not only the Ard, the Bayt, the Kaaba knows it's Ali ibn al-Hussein. Wal-Hil wal-Haram. Why is it saying wal-Hil wal-Haram? Al-Haram is what? The sanctuary of where Mecca is. Al-Hil is the miqat, where you're entering. All these, they know who he is. The whole Hajj knows who he is. And then if you go through the poem, he says, and as for the rock that you're asking about, it's not that he yearned to touch it, but the rock yearned to be touched by him. This is might. This is dignity. And Hisham can fool the masses with his gold, yet in reality, he doesn't have this. He's left with the humiliation of not being able to do this. As a result, he imprisons Al-Farazdaq. That's all he could do. He takes his revenge because he's not going to get there. Just as Qabil killed his brother Habil because he wasn't going to get the recognition. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to forgive us our transgressions. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal not to take us from this world until He is pleased with our actions. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to protect the believers in this time, to aid them through all the problems that exist and illnesses, and to return it on the enemy that has inflicted it upon us. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal that the tyrants are busy killing the tyrants and leave us all safe from this. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to hasten the reappearance of our master, Al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan al-Mehdi arwahuna fidah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma kun li waliyika al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan. صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. ولقضاء الحوائج وقبول الأعمال وتعجيل الفرج وحسن العاقبة وشفاء المرضى وأرواح موتاكم جميعا. رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة مسبوقة بالصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.